I call the Tuesday, June 12th, 2018 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council, a work session to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mrs. Lucasberg. Here. Mr. Moody. Ms. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker. Mayor Rowe.
Here. And I just got a call from Councilman Moody. He's running about now 5 minutes late. Dr. Patton.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. In 2015, the City Council requested a study of the economic impacts on the newly imposed tolls at the downtown and midtown tunnels on the City of Portsmouth. Dr. James V. Cook, Board of Visitors Professor of Economics, President Emeritus, Department of Economics at Old Dominion University, conducted the original study. In January of 2018, I requested the Planning Department to engage with Dr. Cook in having an update of his previous study. Tonight, our first presenter, Dr. Cook, will present his current findings on the economic impacts. The second presentation, our newly elected treasurer, Mr. Page D. Cherry, will present the Treasurer's quarterly report that encompasses his first 5 months as the city's treasurer. And the third and final presentation this evening, Mr. Mike Ammons, the city's purchasing officer, will present an overview of the Virginia Public-Private Education Facilities and Infrastructure Act. Dr. Cook.
Dr. Patton, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I appreciate your taking a little bit of your time so that I can talk to you about my study. As you know, and as Dr. Patton has told you, we've done this before, and since then things have changed. The tolls, of course, have gone up, and the MLK is no longer tolled, and people have adjusted, and we don't have as many closures out there, so it's appropriate to take another look at the impact of the tolls on what's happening in Portsmouth. But these kinds of things are very data intensive, and without these people, I'm not here, and I don't have anything to say. And so special thanks to them, because they really have been terribly important in terms of getting this study done. In the previous study, what I found were that the effects of the tolls were more negative on Portsmouth easily than any other city in the region. That's still true, but defense spending is the most important factor then and now, and I'll show you some numbers there. Taxable sales were reduced about $14 million a year back then, and that's gone down, and I'll show you some numbers there. But the impact was larger on the Midtown Tunnel than on the Downtown Tunnel. And I think the reason for that is it's a little bit more defense-oriented, related to the Naval Base Norfolk and some things such as that. Now, in 2018, Portsmouth is still more vulnerable than any other city in the region, 6 times as much as Virginia Beach. How do I come to that conclusion? Well, if you look at the number of people going in to Portsmouth to jobs and going out of Portsmouth to other jobs in other cities, and you compare that to the population of the city, Portsmouth is simply much more impacted than anybody else. Virginia Beach has lots of people going back and forth, but they have 450,000 people. And Portsmouth's population is much smaller, and so that's one of the reasons why it's affected so much more. But the impact of the tolls has gone down on traffic. People are gradually adjusting. I'll show you in a moment a little bit of data showing that, for example, people are using Easy Pass more often now and some things like that. And I'm not saying they like it, but gradually they're adjusting to the tolls, and so the adverse impact has gone down, but it's still much larger at the Midtown than at the Downtown. My estimate now is that the tolls are costing Portsmouth about $8.8 million of taxable sales annually. On the other hand, a little bit of a positive, I don't find any evidence that the tolls have impacted residential real estate. I'll show you a little bit of data there that the real estate residential market in Portsmouth is actually doing pretty well. Portsmouth properties are very reasonably priced, and that's made them attractive to lots of people out there. The MLK, taking the tolls off, has had a small but positive effect on tolls through the 2 big tunnels. The tolls appear to be having some kind of a negative effect on assessed valuations, but it's going to take a little bit more time to see that because that's a more long-run process in which properties get assessed more slowly and the like. But one of the noticeable negative effects of the tolls is that the old town, downtown area of the city is getting affected much more. And I'll show you some data there that taxable sales are actually down in Old Town, but they're up in the rest of the city. Now, back to this issue of how vulnerable Portsmouth is. If Virginia Beach is 1, then Portsmouth is 6.3 in terms of the relative vulnerability. Much more than Norfolk, much more than Suffolk. And Chesapeake and Newport News and cities like that in the region really aren't affected really very much at all. So when you're talking to members of the General Assembly, what you have to say is that this is a regional facility, but Portsmouth is paying really the major price for its operation. If you look at annual tunnel traffic, both of these lines are sort of downward trending, especially the downtown tunnel. You know, there were 35 million people going through, and even before the tunnels were initiated, it was down to 30 million something. So when you think about declining traffic, the tolls are bad, no question about that, but there are other factors out there, primarily defense spending, and I'll show you some data on that in a moment. Notice, though, that the downtown tunnel numbers have really begun to recover. Not much recovery at all there. We've actually continued the same kind of negative trend at the Midtown Tunnel. Now, if you think about days of the week, the tunnel traffic is very sensitive to the day of the week. And if Monday is the lowest day of the weekdays, then the highest day, as you can see, is Tuesday at Wednesday at 139.6. And relatively speaking, Sunday traffic is even about 30% below Monday traffic. So if you're thinking about it in relative terms, traffic on Thursday and Friday is about twice what it is on Sunday. So there's a real difference there in terms of days of the week. But it's also true in terms of months of the year. And you can see, again, if we scale January as 100, the highest traffic month is August, about 26% higher. And I'm presuming that's vacation traffic and other kinds of things, people going to the beach and the like. So when you're thinking about traffic flows, unless you know the day of the week and the month of the year, you're really missing something because the traffic flows are really highly variable in terms of the calendar. And when you say, well, how can we figure out the impact of the tolls on traffic when there are all of these other factors? Well, economists are data kinds of people. And so we use a technique called multiple regression, which sort of says, look, how can we explain one thing on the basis of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 other things? So the things in gray there are the things that I considered and I could get data on, not only tolls, but month, day, whether the universities are in session, defense spending, jobs in Portsmouth, but jobs in the rest of the region, port activity, and traffic disruptions. Traffic disruptions turn out to be very important on a daily basis. On some days when there's a traffic disruption, meaning that one of the lanes is closed off or even maybe both lanes, traffic is down 70%. And what's even worse is that negative effect trails on to the next couple of days. People say, I didn't get through, I can't get through, I'm not going. And so a traffic stoppage in the tunnels in one day affects Portsmouth in succeeding days. So what did I find? Well, downtown tunnel traffic is down, about 10% relative to what it would have been without no tolls. In Midtown traffic, a little bit more. And so these are both roughly about 60% or about 3/5 of what I found 3 or 4 years ago. So the negative impacts are declining, but they're still very much there. But the most important determinant of tunnel traffic is defense spending after tolls. Defense spending, of course, has been pretty stagnant over the recent years, and this graph shows you that. You can see here that if that's the absolute level of defense spending, or those are billions of dollars, we're actually spending less now on defense in the region, at least we were in 2017, than we were 5 or 6 years ago. And if you take inflation into account, it's really, in real terms, much lower. Now, if there's good news on the horizon, it is that defense spending likely is going up, and so that's going to be good for tunnel traffic and good for the city of Portsmouth. One measure of the impact of defense spending on jobs, and therefore on Portsmouth, is seen in this graph. These are jobs in Portsmouth and actually Hampton Roads, and we've just about gotten back to where we were at the beginning of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. Let me say that again. We're just now getting the number of jobs back that we had about a decade ago. Whereas in Virginia, it's up 5%, and in the United States, it's up 7%. So defense spending has really been calling the tune in the region, and that's, again, one of the reasons why tunnel traffic is down. Now, to give you just a little bit of a snapshot on Portsmouth, if we're only looking at contract spending, now this isn't active duty people, these are simply defense contracts, for example, at the shipyard and places like that. $575 million of contracts in Portsmouth this last year, and 8.3% of all jobs in Portsmouth relate to those contracts. And again, that's separate from the active duty people. So I estimate that there are 2,100 people in Portsmouth who are their jobs are directly due to the contracts, and that's out of a job base of 44,000, because we have these other people who wouldn't be here except that those people are spending money and they're supplying them. Now, you want to look at the percent of city jobs dependent upon DOD contracts. The big shipyard in Norfolk or in Newport News calls attention because there are so many jobs due to contracts there, but Portsmouth actually is more dependent upon defense contracts than Norfolk, which has the largest Navy base in the world. And that's something to bear in mind, because it says really economic activity in the region, and especially in Portsmouth, are really sensitive to the volume of defense spending. Now, I mentioned Old Town Portsmouth before. This is what was happening to taxable sales prior to the tolls. Tolls are input, and now what's happening the next couple of years. Taxable sales are down in Old Town, and I went around then and now and interviewed people at the businesses, and some of them showed me taxable sales numbers, and actually they were broken down by zip codes, and an impressively large number of their customers at some of the restaurants come from across the water, and those people have been discouraged. Now, perhaps that will recover, and perhaps some of that is due to defense spending as well. But if you're out in Churchland, let's say, the impact of the tolls might be a nuisance, but it's not nearly as important as the impact on Old Town. The businesses down there are really being impacted. Now, I talked a little bit about the housing market in Portsmouth. These are rather impressive numbers. You should pat yourself on the back for hosting one of the most impressive housing markets in the region right now. And again, I think the reason for these numbers, that Portsmouth is doing much better than the region, is that properties in Portsmouth are really attractively priced. One can buy a lot of house in Portsmouth now relative to other cities in the region. If you look at the number of homes sold, these are the go-go days in the previous decade, and this is what happened during the Great Recession, and we've recovered an awful lot of that. We're not back to those go-go days, but that's probably a good thing. I talked a little bit about assessed valuation. There's limited evidence there that assessed valuations are not increasing as fast in Portsmouth as they are in the rest of the region. Now, you have to be careful here, because Portsmouth probably isn't comparable to Virginia Beach or Chesapeake in terms of what's going on. But if one compares Portsmouth to Norfolk, to Hampton, and some of the older existing cities, taxable or assessed valuations seem to be rising a little bit less rapidly in Portsmouth than elsewhere. It's going to take a few years to know whether this is really true. But I said before that taxable sales were down by 8.8 million due to the tolls. This translates to about $22 million of declining commercial real estate value. And that in turn translates to almost $300,000 in a loss of taxable real estate. So if you're interested in those numbers, you can look at the report, but this is something that is a matter of concern. Now, if we look at the future, the impact of the tolls isn't as negative as it used to be, but it's still there and it's still pretty impressive. If you look at these Easy Pass numbers, you can see now in 2018, 4 out of 5 drivers are using Easy Pass. And that didn't used to be the case, and that's kind of a sign that they've gotten used to this, because you're going to use Easy Pass if you're going back and forth frequently and you're commuting. So that's good news, but again, Portsmouth is simply so much vulnerable than the other cities that it's feeling a greater impact. If you look at per capita incomes in the cities in the region that are really affected by the tolls, and you think about how much would I pay in Easy Pass tolls if I'm always commuting at a peak time and I commute, let's say, 200 days a year back and forth, well, that's a much larger percentage of income in Portsmouth than it is in Virginia Beach. And that's yet another indicator of the adverse impact on the city of Portsmouth. Now, I always have to say this. Don't blame anything I said on President Broderick or the Board of Visitors. They're not responsible for this, but I do appreciate their support for the kinds of things that I do. And I would simply maybe end up by saying the tunnels are a regional facility. All of the cities are benefiting, and if you look at the traffic going in and out of the cities, you can see that, but Portsmouth is paying the price, a price much higher than the other cities in the region for the operation of the tunnels. Thank you.
Dr. Cook, this is very, very, very well done, and thank you very much for this awesome report. It's very sobering. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have any questions of you. Bill.
Dr. Cook mentioned the infrequency of people not knowing when the tunnel lanes are going to be shut down. It would seem to me that that should be a problem that we can tackle with ERC. You know, why is that happening? They've certainly got adequate revenue to fix whatever they need to fix, and that has been going on now for a few years. So I would think it's past time that ERC get a handle on that and stop those weekend closures. That's what's killing our businesses, weekend closures.
Yes, and they're unpredictable, and they don't do a very good signage. I'm sorry to beat up on them, but they don't do a very good job advertising what's going to go on.
No, they don't. You don't know what you're going to get until you're near the entrance to the tunnel. And then you got to go to Plan B, and people from that point assume that it's the weekend, so I better stay away from the downtown tunnel. I think that's having more closures than the Midtown, but both of them together are killing us, killing our businesses. The tolls is another. It's like we're getting the double whammy in Portsmouth.
In my previous study, I interviewed 10 businesses and went in and talked to them and looked at data to the extent that they would share it. 4 of them aren't there anymore in right downtown, and that's a signal that it's making a difference.
Right, absolutely.
Dr. Whitaker.
Dr. Cook, curious, have you researched at all the impact that the penalties that the tolls have been applying on individuals as far as fines, how that has impacted mobility and job opportunities for persons?
No, Dr. Whitaker, I haven't, but if I had data, I could certainly do that, but I don't know where I could get a hold of those kinds of data that would be trackable to individuals so I could really tell. But just sort of Econ 101 says this is not good. And when you assess large penalties like that on people whose incomes are not that high, it can't help but have a pretty profound negative effect. And, people get something in the mail saying they owe a couple of $1,000. That's a huge hit on some of these people. But it's a data problem there in terms of trying to get at that.
Would those cases be filed in court at all if ERC is pursuing them legally?
That's an interesting thought. That hadn't occurred to me. ERC, of course, could share that.
Right.
We wouldn't have to go to the court records. The city could ask ERC for that. I think that would be a legitimate request.
Lisa?
Dr. Cook, so is this just a pretty picture that we can sell for value? Do we take this to our legislators? Where do we go from here to make a difference in how it's impacting us?
Yes, I think it is, and I think I would sell it regionally, especially South Side, saying this is a regional facility, and I could provide you the data showing the number of people going, for example, from Virginia Beach to Portsmouth and Portsmouth to Norfolk and so forth. This is a regional facility, but the impact is outrageously large on the city of Portsmouth compared to the other cities of the region. So, no, I think this is a saleable thing, and buying down the size of the bonds and doing other things like that are important to the region and to, I hate to exaggerate things, but to national defense and to the port. The port is a statewide facility that has a huge impact across the Commonwealth. I think there's a story to be told here, if only you can sort of get people's ears to recognize that we're really talking about a regional/state facility here.
Good question. Bill?
You know, even things to offer some relief would be state allowing it to be a state income tax deduction. You know, there are things beyond, and I've advocated let's try to renegotiate this deal via a buyout, and I think our legislators we're going to bring that up. But even if the working men and women of Hampton Roads could deduct that as part of their income tax filing, I think that would be good. The other alarming thing is, I just read that the transponder, if you don't use it frequently, the state is one of the few states that pulls the plug on it. And that's not right. You figure the ones that are going to use it probably infrequently are probably the elderly, senior citizens, and they go through there and find out they've been told a plate charge instead of a transponder charge. Those are things that are foolish and need to be corrected, and I think we need to address that with our state General Assembly legislation team, whether we got to do a resolution or what. We need to be aggressive on that. Those are some things that can be done legislatively beyond renegotiating the deal itself.
Let me come back to the notion of deductibility of tolls on the income tax. The practical political challenge here is there are tolls in Richmond and there are tolls in Northern Virginia, and some kind of a deal has to be made with those other constituencies, otherwise it isn't going to fly. And I don't know quite how that would occur, but it would be an expensive item if it were applied to the Commonwealth overall.
Well, how's our impact? I take it our region is more negatively impacted by tolls than the western part of the state.
It's true.
So I think that would be our argument right there, perhaps.
Hey.
One of the concerns, with the traffic and the tunnels, it's always backed up, is every time, the intent of the tunnel is to go under the river to not stop boat traffic. But downtown tunnels hooked to the Berkeley Bridge. So if they have a bridge lift, traffic stops. And I know years ago, the former Jordan Bridge, the Coast Guard had it where certain times of day you could not have a bridge lift, and that was basically due to when the Norfolk Naval Shipyard was coming and going because it had so much traffic problems. I know the maritime industry is so big to us, but at the same time, with the Berkeley Bridge is only access to the southern branch. Because if I remember, I think for traffic, if it stopped for 5 minutes, it takes 35 minutes to recover the traffic flow. So that's an issue there, and it's something that maybe we could address and talk to the Coast Guard specifically about the Berkeley Bridge, because, if you just have a transiting sailboat or something, and it's coming in the middle of rush hour, that just compounds the issue that we're having with the tunnel. So I think that's something that we might could address. And as Dr. Cook's saying, some of these things are regionally. The same issue occurs at the James River Bridge. And, you just have a sailboat coming up river. They open it for every vessel that comes. But between, the morning hours, and that really affects Newport News Shipbuilding, the James River Bridge. So that's something that maybe we want to have a conversation with the Coast Guard and see if they could put time limits on when they open and close that bridge during rush hour on weekdays.
Other questions? This is both a question and a comment. Would you be available to meet with our General Assembly delegation?
Certainly.
And the comment is that I think that we should start with first our delegation to make sure that we have a one-on-one with the members of the House and the Senate, and then expand that to a meeting with the Hampton Roads delegation. And there have been presentations at the Planning District Commission similar to this. Would you be agreeable if we could get you on the agenda? I think that we need to amplify this to the greatest extent, with the goal being to get relief from the General Assembly. As you indicated, this is a regional asset that is being carried on the back of Portsmouth. And I would contend, and I would ask for your validation of this comment, that this is really a state asset, that it's an integral part of the state's transportation system. So, therefore, the state needs to find a way to either buy down the tolls or buy down the bonds.
I am personally, though, going to try to solve this problem by going to dinner in Old Town this evening.
Can we ask Dr. Patton to do those things, to work with Dr. Cook to do that? Anybody disagree with that? Well, thank you so much for this very comprehensive study. Thank you, Dr. Patton.
You're welcome, members of council. Mr. Cherry. See him out.
I was going to be on TV.
As he moved his stuff.
Before you start, thank you for agreeing to do this. We look forward to these quarterly reports.
Probably more semi-annual because I'm in the 5 months now, but we can do a quarter. Mayor, Vice Mayor, it's a little different than on this side of the table. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Dr. Patton, Mr. Ashby, Mr. Butt. Evening. Here tonight to talk to you about my first 5 months in office, or as Dr. Patton would say, the 162nd day of my first year.
Oh, praise God. 162nd day.
And some people I brought with me tonight. I have my Chief Deputy, Joyce Garner, Chief Deputy Margaret English, Deputy Treasurer Bruce Fernandez, and the gentleman sitting between the two ladies is Mr. Dave Fleming from the OPEC Corporation. You'll hear more about him being here in a little while.
Very good.
The Treasurer's Office, what we're attempting to do is become more of a revenue generator than just a tax collector. And, there's been discussions about our investments and how well we're doing in them. And we're doing very well. And we did that by, Deborah, what's happening here? There we go. With our new strategy for taxing, we just called in. We've met with 10 banks since I've been there, 10 different banks. We just had some direct dialogue about banking relationships, investments, and let them know that Portsmouth is open for business. We have money that's available that they can use to make some money, but we need to make some too. And just let them know that we have no preferences, we have no choices. We just want the best bang for Portsmouth's buck, and we've been very successful so far. As you can see, to date, in investment income, we've made over $800,000. And we've been doing this with short-term, 60, 90-day CDs and commercial paper. And since we get a guarantee rate, the monies we have invested right now, by the 3rd of August, we're going to pass $1.5 million in investment income.
That's awesome.
We had people that were questioning the 700,000 figure, so there you go.
We were jumping at 700,000 out the gate. But if interest rates stay the same, by December, we'll surpass 2.7 million. Now, if interest rates go up, we will pass $3 million for this year. So we've been very aggressive with that, and we just cast a wide net, spoke to all the banks, and just putting that in, and people are fighting for Portsmouth money. And so it's a change in strategy, but it's been a very successful one so far. And we hope that the interest rate continue to rise so we can continue to make more money for you and make up some of that money that Dr. Koch talked about you're losing. Mm-hmm. We've taken a holistic look at the office and other cost-cutting measures. And I talked about Mr. Fleming. We just purchased today, matter of fact, today was delivered a remittance machine, which is going to be, right now, when you drop money in one of our drop boxes, it's transported to Maryland, and they submit it to the bank, and it might be a couple of days before it's processed. Well, that's costing us $98,000, almost $100,000 a year to do that. With this machine, we're going to do those things in-house, and we're going to eliminate that $98,000 a year. So I do want to give some thank yous to, there's Mr. Jones, Daniel Jones, Mr. Ammons for helping us with this process and getting this machine in. Digitizing, we'll be doing a lot of that now. We're going to concentrate on that. We have to store things a minimum of from 6 months to 10 years. And that requires a lot of space, a lot of paper. But with this machine, we'll be able to scan those things in and store them digitally and not have to worry about those things anymore. We also took a holistic look at all our banking services. Right now, on average, we're paying about $3,600 a month for banking services. And we're going to be migrating this coming fiscal year to some new services. And instead of paying $3,600 a month, we're going to make $24,000 a month because our excess money is going to be put in an interest-bearing account with a guaranteed interest rate, and it's going to be a reversal. Instead of paying $43,000 a year for banking services, we're going to make $289,000 a year on average. And that was simply by looking at our accounts. There's some accounts we have open, and we write seven checks a year off an account, pay $153 a month. We're eliminating those kind of things. And then we just went to the bank and said, all 10 banks that we spoke to, this is what Portsmouth is paying, this is what we want to pay. I don't want to pay anything, but nothing's free. But they came to the table, and right now we're looking. This is what we're looking at in the coming years. We still do collect taxes. Some of y'all probably got some nice, pretty things in the mail from me recently. You see how I redesigned them and put a little color in them so you make you feel better about paying them? Did that work for you? Yeah. Okay. Well, year to date, we're right now at 86% on our real estate taxes. And at this point, the same period in time last year, we were at 74%. Now, real estate is done quarterly and on a fiscal basis. Personal property taxes, we're at 69%. That's our annual report. Now, that money is still coming in. So, by this point in time last year, we're at 58%. So, the collection rates are up, and we're reasonably sure that we'll have no problem hitting the state requirement of 90% for personal property and 95% for real estate. And we're on target to beating that without any issues that we don't think we're going to have any. You know, when I was on the campaign trail, when I spoke to you before, I talked about our community outreach and other things we want to do. So the Treasurer's Office, we're going to civic league meetings, we're attending job fairs, and we have office visits with everyone. We have office visits just about every department in the city, and we encourage them, as well as the 10 banks that we talked about. But my favorite office visit, to include the Sheriff Department, EMS, we met with everyone, just because everyone's money is collected in the Treasurer's Office. So we've had an audience with everyone to see the best ways we could service them in our collection process. But my favorite office visit to date has been from Ms. Barrett's class at John Tyler Elementary, our first grade class. We brought him in, showed him around the office, talked to him about what the Treasurer's Office did. I went and read to him and what happened. I read to him, and I'd read to him the year before that as the vice mayor. But they hadn't talked to a treasurer before. So they asked me, could they come to my office? I said, sure, thinking that they were going to forget about it. A few weeks later, the teacher calls and says, "Hey, Mr. Chair, they want to come next Wednesday." So we did that. They came next Wednesday. They took over my office.
Look, I'm sitting in your chair.
Well, that one's in the chair is a future treasurer. The one in front, she wants to be mayor.
Oh, my mayor.
So look out.
She's in front of the treasurer.
I deputized them all to complete with the certificates.
Memorable.
And now they're part of the treasurer's family for life.
Oh, that
So
is great.
we had a great time with them. And to continue with the theme of students, with the help of Ms. Gooden in the IT department, we were able to establish our internship program, and we got 3 students, one from each high school this term, and they're actually finishing up a 10-week term tomorrow. And we'll be sending them off tomorrow and getting 3 more students on July the 2nd. And so we'll be having a potluck if y'all available around noon to say goodbye to our 3 students. We got 3 outstanding students from each high school. One is going to Radford University in the fall. One is going to Elizabeth City State University in the fall. The other one is going to TCC. And we're going to maintain a relationship with them. And the one that's going to TCC, we're going to see if we can keep her around while she's still local to help us out, because she's really learned a lot. And all 3 of these students really came in the office and went to work. They weren't just sitting around watching what people work, but they were actually participating and helping us. And I think they learned some valuable things that'll carry them on through life. Office improvements we were looking at. One of the big ones was security. You know, when I went to visit the treasurer's office right after the election, and I went to visit, they just motioned me in to come in. I thought the door was open for me. And while I was standing there talking to the receptionist, the young man I know, and said just walked in. I was like, "How did he get in here?" There are 25 ladies who work in the office, and a lot of money. And people can just walk in. As Bruce Delani likes to say, it's harder to go to the 5th floor than get some paper than it is to get in the treasurer's office. So when the police chief came over for our office visit, she commented as well about the security issue. So I've been working on that since day one, and again, with the help of procurement and IT, we now have controlled entry into the treasurer's office. You still get in, but anybody just can't walk in off the street and walk. Because once you get in there, you're in there and you have access to everything. So we were able to do that. And if you come down now, of course, Mayor, they will still let you in. Those people. They'll still get in. Equipment upgrades, we're looking at all the equipment. We're looking at, the printers, copiers, all our equipment, we're looking at it to renew it and get us back again in the 21st century, because things are old and just not functioning well. And with this new equipment we got now, we need to be able to, everything to be able to talk together in the same language and actually in the same century. And we also had help from Mr. Youssef over in Public Works with doing some changes in the office with the cubicles and everything, make the workflow better, and not just for the office staff, but for the citizens as well when they come in, because some people have to go to real estate and personal property, just making the flow better for everyone. And we've been very successful in that. And just want to say, thank the city and the staff for all they've done. Dr. Patton, I want to tell you that everyone in City Hall has been very, very open and willing to assist and help the new treasurer out with and getting settled. So you should be very proud of your staff. Every department head that I've called have all been amenable. And we have done some great work with the city attorney's office. We are doing a lot of our buildings and demand letters through his office now. We send reams of files to him every week, and they haven't sent any back yet. So thank you very much. So you can't send any back now because all your bosses heard everybody say that. But for the future, we're going to concentrate more on the digitalization, because as I talked about all the things we have to store, we're running out of space fast.
That's right.
And as we continue to store these things, other city departments who need to store things and digitize things, this machine will be available for them to use as well. Now, Mr. Fleming had to come today because he asked me last week how much money we were going to save with the equipment, and I wouldn't tell him. So he can't come tonight to find out how much we're going to save. But we're going to save you $100,000 a year just for having that one piece of equipment in-house, and that's going to be great. The other thing we want to concentrate on, I met the new CFO, She's from North Carolina, one of my favorite states. But we're going to be working very closely to make sure that as we continue this investment process, that we don't overinvest and you have times where you need more money available for things you want to do. So we're going to make sure we're working hand in hand and make sure that we're in coordination. So there are times of the year we know we have to pull back on our investments, and other times where we can ramp it up. So we'll be working very closely, and we've had this conversation already to make sure that we are in sync. And with that, Mayor, I have 3 people back to answer any questions y'all might have.
Questions?
And this is a picture of the machine that we'll buy, and we can pass around. I want to see it.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the job that you're doing and your staff. I know when you were on council, there was a concern about the amount of interest we were earning on the investments. Are you finding now that you're using different investment instruments, or are we getting much better rates than what we had in the past?
Probably a combination. The interest rates have gone up some since I left council, but we've cast a wider net, and we're just competition always breeds better numbers. So the more people you have bidding for it, the more we get. So it's a combination of those things. But we have let all the banks know. We don't matter whether the bank is down the street or in Hampton or in New York. If they can give us the best rate, we'll take their money. And so that's what we're doing. I think we were more localized before and not maybe casting the net as wide.
Are you finding that the rates that you're getting, are those just rates that the average person who walks off the street and wants to invest, are they doing those same rates, or are we getting better rates?
We're getting better rates because on average we're investing more money.
Yeah, okay.
So right now we probably have some 200 that we've invested up to this since I've been in office, over $230 million that we've invested from time to time in increments of either 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and $50 million. And those intervals, we throw them out there for 60, 90 days. So we have $50 million available right now. What do you give me for it? And then we just take the highest bidder.
That's good. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, the money that you've invested, I say to date, $800,758. Does that stay for you to continue to invest, or does that come into a pot of money that we get to have to do some things? That's what everybody want to know.
Good question. And Ms. Garner had that conversation before I came up here tonight. Right now, the money goes back into the general fund for your general use. We actually had the conversation on the way up here about putting that money somewhere to track it and be available for any special projects or whatever you might want it for. But it's really up to you. We will put that money in a separate account if you like, as we yield it, or we can continue to have it go into the general fund. Either way, it's available to you however you want to do it. Now, we do keep track of it. The finance department keeps track on it. We have daily communications with the finance department. We have a great relationship, and so they know all the monies we're making. As soon as we know, Ms. Garner communicates with them and sends them a copy of all the reports. But if you want that money in a separate account, we can do that for you. Just let us know, and it'll just be stacking up.
Might be a good EDA trust fund to work with that we've talked about for how many years?
War chest.
War chest. Mm-hmm.
Did I see your hand go up?
No. But what you call them? Checks in the mail.
Found an interest accrue for the first day. 10% the first day.
Speaking of checks, now if somebody mails it in, it goes to Richmond.
If you put it in the lockbox, it's picked up and transported to Maryland. And then processed and sent to the bank. And that may take a day or two. So if you like to float checks, you need to reconsider, because once we transition to the machine, Mr. Fleming and his crew are going to be here for the rest of the weekend next week, getting us up and running and training. Once we get the machine, if you drop something in the Dropbox tonight, we'll get it out by 8:30 tomorrow morning, and by 2 o'clock today, it'll be the next day, it'll be processed. So you need to make sure the money's in the bank when you write the check.
If you mail the check from home, it goes to Richmond.
No, it'll come here now. But now it does. It's processed and goes up there. Yes, but we're going to be eliminating those things.
Change that.
And see, that's costing us on $77,254 a month to use that lockbox process. and now we're going to bring that in-house. So that's about 35 cents an item. We're going to do it in-house for a penny an item. I'm not asking for any more staff. I know with the current staff we have, we'll be able to do that and save that $98,000. And that figure is as of today. It goes up every year. It's $98,000 this year. If we continue that same process, it'll probably be $103,000 next year, and so forth and so on. But we're going to eliminate that almost completely. The only cost for there is going to be the maintenance for the machine we're purchasing and our in-house manpower.
When you mentioned the 10%, it reminded me of a discussion that we had. That 10% that's paid whenever someone pays more than what their bill is and they have to be refunded that additional 10%, is that something that is being addressed because it was an issue of possible abuse with that someone could literally, if they had a $1,000 tax bill and they send in a check for $2,000, when they get refunded, they have to get a 10% addition to that? I think we were discussing.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. Treasurer, Dr. Whitaker is referring to the refund for any type of real estate tax refund where we have to refund back. I think you'll remember, I believe when you were on council, we had a particular matter where we paid essentially 2/3 of the amount back in taxes. Yeah. In a previous discussion with City Council, I explained to them that one of the concerns on how we control for that matter is to make certain that folks who are paying their appropriate level of taxes. So I believe what Dr. Whitaker is asking is what measures you all have in your office to match an individual's tax requirements versus their payments, so that there's neither underpayment or overpayment.
No, mine is where someone purposefully pays because they know that they're going to get a 10%
money back.
return.
Right. Yeah, we don't have a mechanism to control that because that's unscrupulous people. We really don't have one. That's something we can have a conversation about. But right now, we don't have a way to.
Is it an automatic 10% or is that an annual rate?
It's 10%.
So that may be something for the legislators to address here. So, okay.
But we don't have a way to combat it right now.
Yeah.
Paige, how's the collection rate on meal taxes? Holding steady or improved?
It's steady. We have initiated what we're doing now. We have initiated, and Mr. Luntner does that. When a new business opens, we go and introduce ourselves to them, let them know that we're from the Treasurer's Office, we're here to help, so to speak. And once they what a lot of new businesses don't know is the day you open, you have to start reporting. I see the commissioner here can say. Once they open that first day, you have to start reporting. And a lot of them don't know that. So sometimes they don't report because they don't know that's a requirement right then. So we go out and introduce ourselves to them and explain that to them, and then we work with them to try to get it done. So it's been very successful. We've had a lot of businesses come up and catch up, and we're still doing it every day. We're going out to the businesses and talking to them, let them know before they get too far behind, because once you get too far, you just can't get there. And new businesses who open, a lot of putting money into other things, but that's really the state's money. It just should be coughing off for the state, but they got infrastructure and equipment and things they're doing, and you just don't know. But right now it's steady.
Do we require a bond on that for new businesses? I know some localities do to avoid. Actually, it's to protect them so they don't get behind and have problems. That might be something we want to.
The commissioner handles who's sitting there behind you. He handles that part of it.
Mr. Mayor, would you come to the lectern, please, so we can Get you one.
I didn't put on my pretty blue suit like you.
Sure.
You just want to egg it on my briefing, didn't you?
No, I came to congratulations because I think you're doing a good job. So I want to hear your report, and also Dr. Cook as well. Councilman Moody, to your point, there is a meal tax bond. Council, you may remember we addressed this some time ago with the food trucks and everyone else, and so we've done a lot of research of late with regards to it, Mr. Baldwin and some others, and the city attorney's office and the city manager's office. But there is a requirement for a $1,000 meal tax bond, or 1/10 of what they estimate they're going to make. Of course, they never say the most amount, but what normally happens in that case, they can get a meals tax bond, or they can get a letter from their bank saying that they have that amount. As you heard the treasurer allude to, they come in, they sign a fiduciary note, which makes them responsible to collect the tax on the city or on the state's behalf. So when they come to our office, it is a legal process. We take their ID. That person knows they are responsible for that. And in most cases, and you saying that they, does every restaurant in the city of Portsmouth have a meals tax bond? The short answer to that is no, and the reason for that is because when I came in the office in 2006 rather, I inherited accounts that didn't have that bond. And if they were positive performers, then we didn't go back and make them do that. But after some discussions, most of them today, particularly if they're brand new, they have a bond, with one exception. If they're in a food truck or something like that, to come for a festival, and they have a reciprocal license in another community, like a Chesapeake or Norfolk or something like that, and they're here for one of our festivals or something like that. But the caveat to that is their license expires at the end of that festival, and if they do not pay, then we work with the treasurers and others to make sure they don't come the following year. So in other words, the meals tax bond is there, and I don't want to speak for the treasurer on the collection side, but you still can take them to court to get the collection. So the $1,000 or $2,000 bond or whatever it might be is a safeguard, but it still may not be what they owe. So, but you still, just because they don't have the bond, I don't want to speak for the attorney, but they're still going to court to pay if they owe, and it's 3 years plus the current year. And if anybody's watching, maybe in a larger audience, that think they're not going to pay, that fine is an embezzlement charge. And so if you do take money from the city and you're not supposed to take it, then that's a bad situation.
Thanks. Dr. Batney.
Yes, I had. Thank you, sir. There were 2 points. One, I wanted, if I may, to have Mrs. Washington to speak in regard to, in our budget, you remember we were proposing the budget. The question was, which we answered, how did we go from $70,000 to a projection in our budget to $750,000? And we answered that for you all in a response back. But I want to have Mrs. Washington to speak how we project use of those funds in the projection of the 2019 budget.
Mayor Rowe, members of City Council, as part of our planning process, we had met with the city treasurer, and so in projecting revenues, we knew that there was be a more aggressive policy regarding investments and spreading that net wide, as the treasurer stated. But in the general fund, we have about $750,000 that's planned as part of the adopted budget. But there are some other investment revenues that are allocated to other funds, stormwater, because it's a pool of funding. So there's some portion of the funds also that is in part of the revenues in the other funds. So that's the clarification.
You allocate it back to the source.
Yes.
And it's in their planned budget. So if we have other funds, it's part of their revenue source. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to mention to Council that a couple of months ago, Mr. Cherry called and asked a question of me about the Perpetual Care Fund. And in 1986, when I came to Portsmouth, I was in charge of Parks and Recreation and the cemeteries. And that was a fund that when I came to town back then, I think it was probably about $400,000 or $500,000. And so Mr. Cherry asked Dr. Patton, is there any need immediate, you think, in the next 90 days or 120 days that you would need this money? The city has really maybe twice used that money back in the late 80s when we had major vandalisms in a cemetery and we had to prepare some headstones. But with that said, Mr. Cherry now has that money invested. It is set in a fund. And it's up to about how much, Mr. Cherry, now?
It's over $1 million now.
It was just sitting there.
We made about $25,000 on investing since I talked to you.
That's been 2 months, and it has sat there for 33 years.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, good job.
With that said, we're going to ask Mr. Michael Ammons if he would please come forward, who's the city's purchasing officer, and he's going to present an overview of the Virginia Public-Private Education Facilities and Infrastructure Act. Mr. Ammons.
Thank you, Dr. Patton.
Yeah.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, City Manager again, citizens and staff. My name is Mike Ammons. I'm the purchasing agent for the city, and my name title has been changed, so now I'm the purchasing officer. I'm here to provide an overview of the Virginia Public-Private Educational Facilities and Infrastructure Act of 2002. This act is more commonly known as the PPEA. The City of Portsmouth adopted this act by ordinance on December 14, 2010. The PPEA grants local and state governments in the Commonwealth the ability to enter into partnerships with private entities to compete qualifying projects for the local government. The PPEA allows private entities to offer creative and innovative financing methods and techniques for the project. In order for a project to come under the PPEA, it must meet the definition of a qualifying project. The PPA contains a broad definition of these qualifying projects that include public buildings, infrastructure, and other facilities, and is outlined by the following 2 slides. Okay, the next slide outlines the overall procedures for PPEA project consideration. To summarize, a qualifying project can either be solicited by the city or be received as an unsolicited proposal. Solicited proposals follows the city's procurement guidelines as supplemented by the provisions of the PPEA. Once an unsolicited proposal has been accepted by the city, it's required that a public notice be prepared inviting competing proposals. That proposal must be advertised for a minimum of 45 days.
Will you take questions as we go on?
Yes, sir.
So what you just said, it's advertised once and open for 45 days, or how often do you advertise?
What happens is you have to have competing proposals to that solicitation. So once an unsolicited proposal is received, other offers are allowed to come in and offer competing proposals. That process has to take 45 days. It has to be published in a newspaper of local circulation and open to public review for 45 days from that fact.
So once published, there's a 45-day window, and at the 45th day, the window closes.
Oh, yes, sir. Okay, the next 2 slides will talk about evaluation. PPA proposals are evaluated with the evaluation factors by these slides. The city has the authority to add additional criteria as required. And the PPA is designed to provide broad flexibility in evaluating projects. Once the evaluation process is complete, the city may then enter into either an interim agreement or a comprehensive agreement with the selected private entity. It's a requirement of the PPEA that 30 days prior to enter into any agreement, the city must hold a public hearing providing a summary of the proposals received. Now, once those steps are completed, the city can then enter into an agreement with the private entity and go on with the project. Are there any questions?
Questions? Once you receive a proposal, put protection in there when you put it out, advertise it again for competing proposals. What protection is it in there for something that's unique?
Councilman Moody, the proposer, the offerer can protect the information in there under the auspices of the Virginia Public and Freedom of Information Act. So things that they mark proprietary and confidential cannot be released for public view.
Okay, so the RFP that would go out would be just in general nature.
Are you talking about a solicited or unsolicited?
Unsolicited proposal.
Okay.
Say if I do present an unsolicited proposal and it has some unique qualities in it, proprietary in nature, knowing that you'll have to put a proposal out, what protection is there for my proposal, my uniqueness?
So you're the one that presented it to us?
Yep.
Okay. Once you mark that information as proprietary and confidential, that information is yours. We cannot release it publicly to anybody without your permission.
Okay, so there is protection of proprietary
Oh, yes, sir.
information.
Sir.
Other questions? Elizabeth?
And when it's all said and done, if there are 3 proposals, the city can also say, no, we don't want any of them.
That's correct.
Dr. Whitaker.
So has the recent proposed unsolicited proposal that was mentioned to council, has that been posted publicly? Has it followed this process?
Yes, sir. A copy of the proposal is available for public review in my office.
So the 45-day period is ticking?
Yes, sir. It started May the 23rd. It ends July 9th.
Okay. Question. Why is it that this process is proceeding through an unsolicited bid and not an RFP that the city would put out?
Proposals can go either way. You can take an unsolicited proposal and then you could reject it and go out and solicit it, or you can take it and evaluate it and offer competing proposals. In this instance, the city decided to treat it as unsolicited and offer and ask for competing proposals.
No, I guess what my question is, why is it that the city did not go through an RFP process?
Well, okay. When the proposal was received, city decided to treat it as unsolicited.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, regardless of whether an unsolicited proposal was sent, why is it that there was not an RFP process taken with this instead of the process we're going through now?
We haven't decided to do it yet.
Hold on, I'm talking. Let me direct the questions to the procurement office.
Dr. Whitaker, this is there are 2 separate. The path runs 2 separate directions.
Right.
Request for proposals is our standard solicitations.
Right.
What we do. The PPA allows, it's broader and allows more creative financing and other things in there that we can use. So when this proposal came in as an unsolicited proposal, it fell under the PPA. It did not fall under the Virginia Public Procurement Act.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Forget the unsolicited proposal process. I'm just asking, why is it that the city did not initiate an RFP process?
This is a policy question, and it's unsolicited. We had not decided to do anything. This just fell in our lap, is the way I understand it. Yeah. And so it's not making a choice. You go solicited or unsolicited. This one just came.
Right, I understand that.
Right.
That's not.
That's an unfair question to him.
He can't answer.
No, I was just asking why hadn't the city.
That's a question you should be asking to us.
He can't answer
Well,
that.
we were aware that we had to go through this process of moving the city hall, the jail off the waterfront. That's been known for some time. I was just curious why it was never proceeded through by an RFP process.
Because we never discussed
Can't
it.
answer. Can't answer.
Yes.
And are not we still waiting for staff reports on space assessments and properties that are available that the city already owns, and we're just not that far along.
Right. That's where we are right now.
When we made the decision back at our retreat, we authorized the city manager to do just that, to start the process of studying what do we need, the amount of space, what do we need as far as geographic location for a public safety building, what are the stormwater requirements, and that study is underway. And then out of the blue, you get this proposal.
Right. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Typically, how many unsolicited proposals come in a year?
I don't know. They aren't
In a
gone.
year, I've been here since 2003. We've received exactly 3.
Wow.
Okay.
How many?
Other questions? Okay, thank you. Dr. Pat?
All right, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, you have 4 items that are coming before you this evening for the city manager's report. The first is an adoption assistance. Adoption of an ordinance accepting adoption assistance funds in the amount of $64,735 from the Virginia Department of Social Services and appropriating said amount in the FY 2018 Social Services Fund for use by the Department of Social Services to provide adoption assistance. I call to your attention that this amount and the purpose of this adoption assistance is to help facilitate adoptive placements and ensure permanency for children with special needs. We are finding across the state, not just in our city, that children with special needs, there are challenges with getting them placed within foster care, and so the state is allocating additional monies to departments of social services to try to help with adoption assistance in this manner. The second one is a grant that the city has received for the 2019 Umoja Festival Marketing Grant. It's adoption of an ordinance accepting a grant in the amount of $10,000 from the Virginia Tourism Corporation and appropriating said amount in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Marketing, Communications, and Tourism to market the 2019 Umoja Festival. The third is the CDBG and Home Investment Partnership Program. It's adoption of an ordinance accepting an additional $157,971 of Community Development Block Grant CDBG program funds, an additional $112,199 of Home Investment Partnership Program funds, and appropriating the said amounts in the FY19 Community Planning and Development Fund for use in the implementation of annual action plan. As we develop the 2019 budget, we shared with you, members of council, that we have to wait, although we are planning the budget on the amount that we have to wait to see what the federal government is going to give the city toward additions or reductions. In this case, there is an addition, and the annual allocation to the CDBG is $1,557,075, and the actual allocation for home is $453,783 for a total of $2 million this year in 19, $9,858. And the allocation is $270,170 more than expected at the time of the city's budget preparation. The last item tonight is an adoption of a resolution declaring a certain city-owned property having a size of 4/100th of an acre and an address of 50 Mimosa Road, which the tax parcel is 0641-0140, to be surplus real property and authorizing the conveyance of same to Willett J. Smith. Those are the 4 items for tonight's meeting.
Dr. Patton, we
Yes.
do a public hearing on that one, that last item.
Yes, we will have a public hearing on it.
Do you have somebody that's going to make a brief presentation on that?
We could. We were not planning to, but we could.
It might be
and show
good
the map.
so that we can tee up the public hearing on that.
Okay. We shall do that.
So at that point, I'll ask Dr.
Mr. Ball.
Patton, yeah.
Right. And I'll get Mr. Ball to pull it up.
And Mr. City Attorney, can you explain the public hearing on 18215, the wireless facilities franchise?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as you know, we have had on one or two occasions these wireless facility franchise agreements come forward. This evening, there's one that has been submitted for Cox Communications, and that is before you. As we have discussed prior to, we have reviewed those matters, and we don't foresee any particular issues. I don't believe at this point we have any additional bidders involved, so it should be just a single bid that's coming before you this evening.
Any questions on the public hearings?
I have a question on the wireless franchise bids. Is this, once again, is this something that was put out for bid and Cox is the only one that responded?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, much like all of our franchise bids, these are folks who are applying for access. So they're not, communication companies are allowed to make that request or application, but it is still open to whomever. This is not a solicitation. This is not what you would consider a procurement bid. This is a franchise agreement where they come and apply for access through the franchise agreement. So this is not an advertisement. This is initiated by the companies.
And is this exclusive?
No, because much like the rest of the city's utility franchises and the discussion we had overall, we fully expect there's still some other folks that will be coming behind it, making the same application.
And this is really, they're asking technically to use our right-of-way.
Correct. That is the application, to have access to the right-of-way for extended period of time for the purposes of providing the 5G 4G wireless service.
Any questions on this? Any questions about the property?
I think we have that. Will we have the map that we'll be able to put up?
Yes, we have one that we can use.
Yes, we will. We'll just put it up on the screen.
Okay.
And we'll have Mr. Jones will speak to it.
Were there any net neutrality issues in this franchise agreement, or was that addressed at all?
No. And again, the net neutrality issues, as we discussed before, is a federal controlled issue. With regard to our facilities, those are issues within the control of the FCC.
Well, I know during our previous discussion there were some concerns about trying to put some protections in spite of the net neutrality rulings.
And I believe I explained at that time, certainly there are some fairness provisions in terms of our approval and guaranteeing a certain level of fairness across the board, but it doesn't, I don't equate those to the net neutrality issue. Again, we're talking, and I always use the water pipe sort of analogy. We're talking about folks who are building the pipe. The net neutrality issue is what's flowing through the pipe. That's a federal concern. We can certainly make sure there's access and we have some level of control, but it does not rise to the level of what we commonly call the discussion of net neutrality. That is a federal issue.
Dr. Patton?
Yes, I was going to say, Dr. Whitaker, I met briefly with Mr. Daniel Jones today because the articles that have come out overnight of now the change in net neutrality, and he's provided for me that I'll be getting to you all what he deems or sees that may be impact to our citizenry here in Portsmouth. So it's a big article in the paper today.
Well, yeah, the reason I was raising it too is because the state is, although maybe what you're saying a federal issue, the state is part of a 22-state lawsuit
Trying to block
on this net neutrality
Right.
issue. So, yeah.
We got time if you want to take this time, or do you want more time later?
No, we're not ready with that right now, Mayor. But I'm not finished yet. I have report backs whenever you're ready.
Any other questions on the agenda?
Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, at the May 21st public work session, there were several items of which we are providing to you this evening report backs. The first was a request to provide the total cost of the new public safety radio system. And the public radio system, also referred to as LMR, the Land Mobile Radio, was established as a CIP project and a total projected fund of $11 million. The CIP funding was completed with appropriations of $3 million, $4 million, and an additional $4 million in fiscal year 2012, 2014, and 2016, respectively. The anticipated project completion and cutover would be complete Q4 2019, and expected new tower construction will begin in third quarter 2018. So that is the report back on the public safety radio system. The next request was staff to look at installing lane delineation markers to divide the two-way traffic on the Churchland Bridge.
You're
The
there,
next
and I
morning,
appreciate
the
it.
next morning that was done. Okay. The third was staff, and I appreciate that too, Mr. Moody. The third is staff to follow up on with VDOT to report possible dangerous conditions to the speed at Frederick Boulevard exit ramp from I-264E. We have two pictures in this report back, as shown in the photos. VDOT ERC had already has appropriate notifications in place, and they initiated this. The fourth is request the PIT truck traffic staff.
This is the intersection where you're going eastbound. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, not westbound.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Request PIT truck traffic. Staff to study the need to prohibit truck passing through Virginia Avenue. PIT truck traffic should be using the MLK and I-164 exits. The roadway classification for Virginia Avenue would allow the city to prohibit truck traffic and still be consistent with now the state address similar requests. By city code, the truck route map will have to be modified by city council action. However, before considering this measure, staff is recommending that it would be prudent for us to determine the impact to businesses on the south side of High Street corridor along Confederate Avenue and on Turnpike Road that would be impacted by this restriction. So,
Let's see what our consensus is.
Well, I just had a question statement about that, and I understand we don't want to hurt any of our businesses, but as the truck routes go, typically the way the enforcement is done, if it's no through trucks, if their destination is within that area, they're still allowed to use that route. It's just for the ones cutting through the area, so we wouldn't intend on hurting these businesses. It's just for the ones that are using it as a thoroughfare, because it is still residential along Virginia Avenue, and that was the concern, was the safety for those residents.
All right. You're shaking your head.
I'm just agreeing with
agreeing.
what
So
Nate
we need to move. What do we need to do?
So I take that, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that instead of doing the impact analysis, to go ahead and bring back the proposal to
Yes, for you all to approve.
to approve.
All right, so we'll move
Have
forward on
agreement
that.
on that? Sure. Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. The next, staff to ask VDOT to undertake another traffic light warranty study for MLK exit and entry at High Street. The city engineer spoke with VDOT Traffic Engineering Group, as well as the Elizabeth River crossing. VDOT right-of-way ends at the foot of the ramp, which it ends right there at High Street. As such, all ramp terminal signals are the responsibility of the locality. VDOT's only role would be to the desire to review the city's engineering study before implementation. With council's concurrence, I would have staff to move forward to begin the engineering study in preparation for the installation of a signal at the proper location that would impact that off-ramp.
Everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, it's not the state. We thought we could get the state to do the
the state's permission. We can ask
They've
them.
got to review it, though. They have to review our study of what we need to do to locate a light.
So whenever we have the traffic signals put in and I see it's a piece of equipment that sits on the side of the road that changes the signals, that's all the city's responsibility.
If it's on city streets. This is coming off of interstate.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council. To answer your question, Dr. Whitaker, yes. The controller is the city's responsibility.
Okay.
There are some state-maintained roads in Portsmouth, like 164.
Correct.
What are the others beside the interstate?
Interstate 164 and parts of Rotunda.
Parts of what?
Rotunda. The backside of Cavalier Manor, right there next to Greenwood. And I think a small portion of Liberty on the other side of Cavalier Manor, adjacent to the interstate as well.
We'll just get approximately how much will that cost to put in the signal there that's needed at that intersection?
Anywhere, because of the type of mast arms and what you would need, anywhere from $60,000 to $120,000.
And we're giving you the green light to prepare the engineering study and bring back the cost.
Yes. I was going to ask Mr. Wright, since the state has created this issue for us, this was not our issue with the coming of the ramp, the way the ramp comes off, the wide broadness of the ramp. Is there any way you think we could appeal to the state to see if they would help us or address it?
The only way that I could foresee that the state would participate is if we tried through some sort of funding program they have available. And that'd be a matter of timing. You have to do an application, and then you have to actually get the funding. So it just depends on the timing thing. How fast do you want the signal? You want to go through that process to try to get state funding. So
Doing like a grant or something.
Yes, that's a grant. But this is a major issue that's been called to our attention many times.
I think it's a safety issue we need to proceed with.
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
We still ask the state. I like your idea.
Okay, all right, I tried.
Cause this mess.
Right.
I heard that.
All right. All right. The next request of council is staff to ask VDOT to study limiting trucks to the right lane only on I-64, I-164 to help reduce traffic congestion in the area of West Norfolk Bridge to points east and west. The city engineer is continuing to research the feasibility of limiting trucks to the right lane on Virginia I-164. To date, we have only found information as it relates to interstate roads. Virginia 164 is not an interstate road. The city will need clarification from VDOT, of which we will be seeking, and we will report back. The next involves the health department. Can the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program grant funds received by the health department be used to cover medical costs HIV/AIDS patients at the regional jail? The answer to that, Mr. Clark, is no, but I will share with you what Dr. James shared. The Ryan White Grant Clinic provides treatment, counsel, and education for patients with HIV and AIDS. The city's health department clinic is supported by EMS, Eastern Virginia Medical School staff. AIDS Drug Assistance Program, or the ADAP, patients are eligible for assistance with their medication. The health department grant only covers salaries of the providers in the Ryan White Clinic on site. The clinicians work to get the patient's medication to reduce or no cost using the ADA Drug Assistance Program. Thus, we would not be able to cover medical costs for patients in the jails. The last was provide information on the Revive Narcan training. The city's health department currently does not provide the Revive training to date. There has not been enough requests to hold a class. The health department and the behavioral health care services are working together to explore ways in which they can further engage the community to ascertain the scheduling, the participation, and thereby the scheduling of a Revive training class. And they will both present that together, getting the number of people that are interested in taking the class. That concludes the report backs for the May 21st meeting.
thank you so much for your responsiveness. Particularly, it's pretty awesome to have a request at night, on a Tuesday night, and Wednesday find the delineation markers up.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It does help.
Yeah,
It really does.
That completes my report for tonight.
Thank you. Yeah.
You have one question, just in reference to what you just told us about the Revive class.
Yeah.
That, the health department, behavioral health care, says they're going to work in ways to further engage the community. Is that something that we could work to as the city as far as trying to help them advertise?
Oh, we're going to advertise.
Okay, that's what I was
when
trying to-
Board of Health goes in the health department,
Okay.
we will be
I
advertising
know
and getting
there's-
that out there.
I think once the information gets out there, I think you'll have more than enough participants because it's a great need.
Before we leave you, any further report on our pavilion?
Yes, where did Mr. Wright go? Okay, Mr. Wright is prepared to give an update on the pavilion. Thank you.
So last Tuesday, I met with Span Systems over at the pavilion, and we went through their work plan to take the tent down. We spent a little bit more than an hour, between an hour and a half. We walked through the things that he would have to do to make sure that he could safely take the tent down, and what he would need to do. He had to go back and make some revisions to his original work plan. I received those revisions actually right before I came up here for the city council meeting. Once I go through that and we're clear on everything that needs to be done, I'll give him the go-ahead, and he'll be in town next week to start the removal process.
Have we got any decision yet on the insurance? I would think that damage is probably a design flaw of some sort. I wouldn't think that would be normal wear and tear to have that type of structural failure. So have we explored that possibility yet?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council, we are looking at, based on the information we have, we are looking at what may be the causes as well as what may be resources implicated in terms of whatever fixes we have to put in place. So we are keeping our mind's eye to potential claims or other issues that might result in ultimately assisting us in getting that venue back to where it needs to be. So yes, that is under consideration.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Well, this brings us to City Council liaison reports, and we'll start with
Personnel Committee met yesterday. So
yes.
with our
And you have
appointees.
boards and commissions. We'll discuss this at our next meeting.
Right.
Please.
Yes, I think everyone gets a copy of the Planning Commission report. You do? Okay, so you know about the use permit and the code amendment that we have. Those were both approved by the Planning Commission, and they'll come to us. One for the micro distilleries use with the food trucks. And the other one is they finally found a tower use behind Bob Ewell tire shop for the T-Mobile. So
For the
those are good
monopole.
things. Yes, for the monopole.
No, the Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority Board, we meet next week, so I'll have an update after that.
HR Tax meets this month too, and so I have a report on that. With that, we don't need a closed session, do we?
No.
Oh, sir.
Well, then we'll adjourn and have supper
Okay.
and reconvene at 7.